We're going to start with our panelists describing their experience and their past and current protest coverage, their takeaways for best practices, getting protesters to talk, covering violence in context, staying safe. Our guests are Stephanie Brumsey, class of 2009, a segment producer for KCDC on MSNBC. We have Adam Peck, class of 2011, who has been in progressive journalism for his entire career and is currently on the communications team at the Center for American Progress. So Stephanie, let's begin with you. Tell us about your experiences covering protests.
So I have to say that my first experience covering a protest would be in Ferguson. And I was told like, hey, we're going to give you this opportunity to go help cover Ferguson. They were really clear on hoping that my presence there would be able to lend them some sort of knowledge or ability to speak with the community that they were lacking. So I went for a couple of days before they pulled me out, thinking it was a little too violent. So like that was my first experience. What an experience. Here I've covered protests with Reuters, various ones in the city, Black Lives Matter protests, and different events. And now I am covering this with MSNBC, admittedly not in the streets. I haven't been there long enough to get the training that I need to in order to go out with the field team, but covering it on the back end, trying to provide context, trying to provide different story angles to take, sometimes butting against staff who have positions of power to tell them that we are doing this wrong. Yet again, I am the only Black person on my team. So they come to me for, quite a few questions and contextual information. And that's where I'm at right now.
I've covered protests, I'm going back years now, both as a reporter on the ground. I'm just, for everybody's awareness, I'm located in Washington, D.C. I've been down here since January 2012. And so, obviously we've seen quite a few large scale protests over the years. When I first started, as a professional journalist, I was a reporter, so I would go out and cover some of these protests on the ground and report back. And then later in my career, when I was an editor, I was responsible for overseeing some of our coverage of other protests, both here. Professor Sullivan mentioned Charlottesville. We had reporters on the ground there when that protest erupted a few years ago. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely, you learn a lot when covering this and covering these protests. And also, these protests have changed a lot, even in the last, 5, 6, 7 years, just in terms of, the tone of them, the nature of them, the scale of them, I would say as well. And, I think that I want to touch on something that Stephanie mentioned a minute ago. I think oftentimes, there is a propensity in a lot of newsrooms to, in the last few years anyway, really kind of draw attention to the question of diversity on a news staff, which is obviously important. Less talked about and less addressed, I would say, even now, is issues of inclusion and what to do, when you actually do have reporters, non-white reporters in your newsroom. It's one thing to hire them. It's another to actually listen to them and to involve them in the story process to ensure that their voices are being heard. And I think very often, even in well-intentioned newsrooms, you see some progress being made in terms of the people that they're hiring, and they wipe their hands and say, great, we've increased our non-white staff by 10%, 15%. We've done our job. Covering these protests is important, and journalists have, the responsibility of journalists, as you all know, it's constant, but never is it more important, I would say, than in these kinds of large-scale protests that are shaping I mean, not to put it, engage in too much hyperbole, but it really is, one of those kind of inflection points in the country in terms of where we go from here. And journalists are, you hear it all the time about, have journalists are responsible for the first draft of history, and it's true. The direction that our coverage takes is in the hands of the people who are on the ground and in the hands of their editors. And it is not a task that should be taken lightly. And it's one that needs to be done thoughtfully and with, a lot of purpose. And you really only get one shot at it.